Hello and welcome back to Autistic Radio. It's 5:55 p.m. here in the UK, and this is the time that we look at Harry's Facebook page. One of the lovely things that we have here is Harry creates a Facebook page that picks out things to do with autism that tend to work on the positive, or he picks out pieces that we really should discuss as autistic people. So thanks to Harry, there's a whole wealth of different posts that we can discuss. The way you find that is just by looking for Autistic Radio Com on Facebook. That's just all one word, Autistic Radio Com. If you follow us there, you'll also be notified about any of the recordings that we make, lives that we have, or podcasts or events that we have. A lot of people who followed us on Facebook in the first instance started to join us in conversations, and the way we do that is through the 444 at 4:44 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time in the UK. We have a group of people that get together and drop in and just talk generally about either what's going on in their lives or things that have come up relating to autism. That's not recorded, or should I say that is recorded, but it's not out there live, which means that when somebody joins us new, their voice or their texts are private to them. But some of us are happy to have our words out there, and we put out a podcast just based on what we said. We don't change anything in that. There's no editing. The only thing we do edit is take out the long pauses that we have in our conversations. Long pauses are there so that everyone gets the opportunity to speak if they want to. So if you're new to Autistic Radio, or you're one of the people that have been listening to us quietly in the background, consider joining us for a 444 Sundays, every Sunday we're there, or consider joining us on a 555, because the 5:55 p.m. allows you on Facebook or LinkedIn to comment by text. So you can join and you can direct the conversation, or you can put your views forward as well. I have a studio full of people. We have Lucy and Nicola and Raymond that are joining us today. So I'm going to say this is the time to start with Harry's Autistic Radio Com Facebook page and see what he's shared for us. The first post is from that autistic lady, somebody that he shares from quite often. I made a massive decision this week that shocked me. It was one that really opened my eyes to how much progress I've made in my autistic/ADHD burnout recovery. And it made me reflect on how different that decision would have been even months ago. To get to this point, it's taken years, 3.5 years. I don't feel completely recovered, not even close, because burnout recovery isn't linear and it's not quick. It's actually been the complete opposite for me. One thing I've seen throughout my recovery is others claiming that they have the cure for burnout, or that after a few months of rest and meditation, they are better than ever. Great. That may have worked for them. But we're all different, and personally, no amount of meditation is going to tell my brain to shut up and rest. Everything is specific to the person and their needs. I'm all for people being healthier and happy, but I also know when you're early in your recovery journey and you don't feel that way, it's so easy to hang on to someone's every word in pure desperation to feel better. What do other people feel as a reaction to this post?
I can relate to that. You know, the burnout recovery and being years into that. I would say it's felt like having to like build a completely new lifestyle. And yeah, I think it has got to be unique. Like everybody's different. Everybody's got different needs and things that are going to be healing for them. And it really is for me, it really was like, has been like a journey, and it still is a journey of like really getting to know myself, and kind of how I interface with the world.
I think that I've always pushed through my burnout and felt that you just have to keep on going and keep on going. I do have things that I use, not meditation or any of those things that I'm sure they're really helpful and useful. I'm just not very good at sitting very still and having thoughts in my head and try to balance everything. I often find I have to block the noise out and listen to podcasts and things like that. I mean, everybody finds their way. Pushing through it doesn't work. Finding something that balances you probably does, and that can come from a lot of different areas. It doesn't have to come from one of sitting and meditating or anything like that. It really does. You do have to tailor it to the person.
I'm still trying to identify burnout for myself.
I actually know of a tool, like a little quiz that a psychologist made up. It was quite a helpful one to identify it. I feel like I can identify symptoms of burnout for me now, that I don't, now that I'm not burnt out every year and a half, but back before then, I just thought it was life. So it was quite hard to kind of come into a state of well-being that was so unfamiliar.
Yeah, I tend to think it is life too, currently. It's like, although sometimes I suspect that avoidance is my coping strategy.
It feels to me as though the word burned out is stretched a little. People have all kinds of autistic crises, don't they? Whereas maybe we should reserve the word burnout for something that has become so debilitating that it is a long process to come back from. We tend to overuse these big words as human beings, all of us. I'm going to read a little bit more about her post. Throughout my recovery, I've shared things that have helped me because it may help someone else. But I always explain that I'm still in recovery myself and will be for many more years. What works for me might not work for someone else. So whilst I'm happy to share my experience, it's more of a cautionary tale and to make someone feel less alone if they're experiencing the same, rather than advice. I'm not going to post a follow this 47-step plan to get out of burnout or even pretend I know a magic fix, because that's not true. Instead, I'm going to tell you the raw, gritty parts and how things are slowly changing. When I look at my recovery in stages, it seems even slower, and that's okay, because that's what I need. Each year, I'll progress in some ways, but I'll also regress in others. I'm also a completely different person. I don't want to get back to who I was. I'm not a better version of myself either, but it is different. So my very long-winded point is, wherever you are in your recovery journey, you're exactly where you need to be. I'm sure at various times we'll return to that autistic lady and hear some more good advice from her. Moving on to Mike's neurodivergent toolbox. It's a meme. The autistic paradox of having an intense need for deep connections, but the near inability to make that happen. Would anybody like to react to that?
Yes, I can really relate to this, as I have absolutely no skills when it comes to actually linking up with people and, you know, and making a connection with them. I've just not got that muscle, I guess. I'm not using the, and I don't know how. And there have been times when I've been intensely lonely, and I even had opportunities to connect, but just finding that I do have an inability to know how to follow up on that. And even if I do follow up on that, I don't know how to keep a friendship going or what I need to do next. It's almost like I feel that there's a kind of a script that I need to follow, and I can't follow it because I just haven't learned it. And because of that, I find myself quite isolated, and every now and then I think I just wish I could do something different and be out there and have friends and social life and all that, and it doesn't really happen. And you can beat yourself up over it a little bit sometimes because you just feel that there's a fault in yourself that you can't do it.
I'm wondering what exactly is meant by a deep connection. I'm assuming I know, and I think we all do that. But what Lucy said there about a script is that sometimes when I reflect on these matters, it's like, am I remembering things in the past, like a friendship or a connection that felt deep for me? And do I feel I want that again or desire it in some way? Is that what's going on when I think about deep connections? Or am I feeling right now within myself some kind of lack or a gap or an emptiness? So then I think about what is a deep connection. Do I always feel that need? And can only a friendship and a so-called deep connection fulfill it for me? Or other ways of doing this, of engaging with this personal experience, because that's what it is. Although socializing is a two-way thing or multiple-way thing at times. It depends whether you're social or sociable. There's very many threads here to untangle for me, but I'm reflecting on what Lucy said because I understand that need.
I'm really deeply glad that I managed to find myself married. When Dave came into my life, I was very much a complete island and had nobody really around me. So that's the one saving grace for me. Is I always say that my husband is my personality, so he will guide me if we go out and meet people. Then he's always saying, I've got you and I'm with you, and so it makes it easier for me. So I guess I do have, you know, something that other people may not have, which is another half who, although he's not neurodivergent, although that's maybe the case, I don't know, but you know, he's my lead. He will be there to just bolster me should things get tough.
I suppose when they say in this meme deep connections, they're trying to differentiate from, you know, the trivial, everyday, small talky kind of, you know, pseudo friendship, and say real friends as opposed to acquaintances. And all human beings have a real need for greater connection with other human beings than the trivial everyday. Is there a paradox that when an autistic person recognizes that they need connections with other human beings because that gives them a sense, grounds them, gives them a sense of self and value and worth, but then we find so many difficulties socially to get the next steps, to get beyond the trivial? I suppose there is a paradox that something that you need as a human being is difficult to attain in the society that we're in, but it is possible. I think the real problem that we have sometimes is being self-reliant and seeing that as the way to be entirely might mean that we are avoiding or giving up on something that we could really benefit from. So I wonder if maybe what we should take away is that it is worth trying and finding techniques to try and find a connection, especially if those connections are with other autistic people, because there will be an empathy with other autistic people that really satisfies that human need. So my voice doesn't dominate today's recording. Is it possible that somebody could read the text?
I don't have access to Facebook or anything. I wouldn't mind reading if it was like, you know, accessible, but I don't think it will be.
Which one is it, Jules? Because I've just got a whole series of autistic radio replays coming up here. I'm just waiting through them just now. Podcast revisits. And then I get to one that says, what's this? The Autistic Teacher.
Yeah, you've gone a bit too far down, mate.
Right.
We'll edit this down. It's immediately after the first one, the autistic lady, and then Mike's neurodivergent is the second one down. Then there's a whole load of reposts, and then we have to go past them to get to the next one. As far as that, Nicola, the texts are in the private chat. They're not in the comments on the Facebook bit. If you look on the studio, comments are where it's being broadcast live, and private chat is where we can talk to each other. And some people have put things in the private chat. I just think if somebody else reads them, rather than me just having too much of my voice.
Yeah, will do.
So yes, on the Facebook, we have a lot of podcast revisits, and sometimes our Facebook page seems a little bit dominated by these automatic posts, but Autistic Radio is about putting out podcasts. So I have reissued some of our podcasts recently. There's one in the series Late Diagnosis, talking to Ramon, the autism lead officer, about autism legislation. There's one in the Explain-Me-Autism series about floor time, an alternative to ABA, with Dr. Colette Ryan. There's one in the Autistic Traveling series where Nicola talks to myself. We haven't finished that series yet. There's a bit more to come. Episode 4 of Autistic Traveling Mumbai to Goa. There's a podcast revisit of Scott Frasard, the late identified autistic adult, episode 10 in that one of the series. And then there's a new podcast, the 555 from previously in February, and the adult autistic drop-in podcast, the 444, which comes from our meeting that we have on every Sunday. There's also one from the Big Autism Conversation, episode 17. There'll be about 30 of those eventually, with Alan Tennyson from the Irish Society of Behaviour Analysts. So whenever we have a podcast that we put out newly, it creates a post on Facebook, and that is one way to follow if you follow the Facebook page, you'll see what we're doing in all of the different activities that we have here on Autistic Radio. Moving to a post from the Autistic Teacher, a meme. I have more conversations in my head than I do in real life. And I think we're all going to be able to relate to this one.
Just before I comment on that, we've got Kathy commenting on Facebook saying the Facebook posts are great for us who are overseas, though, especially with the time difference.
Thank you, Kathy. Feel free to join us. I'll put a link so that if you want to come into the studio, it's there for you. Going back to the post itself, does anybody relate, Lucy?
Oh yeah, very much. Sometimes it's not even conversations in my head. A lot of the times I have conversations with myself out loud, because I need to choose stuff over. Sometimes if it sits in my head, and I'm having these conversations in my head, it does come out my mouth. I can't help it. I walk around the house going, if I do that and then that. A lot of it is trying to get things into a good rhythm and order for me. I don't talk to many people outside these four walls. That's very true. But if I speak to myself, I know I'm probably going to get the answers I want. So I'm quite reliant on my own sort of thought process. But a lot of it is about organisation, or something I'm worried about, or And being able to voice that, even if nobody can hear you, even if it's not a conversation, for me, is important, because otherwise it just gets stuck between my ears, and I don't want it to stay there. I want it to be out.
I agree with that.
I'd love to know what I sound like when I'm walking around the house doing this. I find, I find things amusing, and, have a little laugh about it to myself. And, so I don't know how it must sound. Luckily, nobody can hear me, apart from Dave sometimes, but he's not too worried. He tries to ignore it. But yeah, I talk to myself a lot, conversations in my head a lot, because I'm just going through my own little inner checklist to make sure that the day goes as I want it to.
I think
Is
sometimes.
this meme just...
Go ahead, Ray.
No, I was just thinking, is this meme just what is written there in the black square? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the word meme now just means some kind of post that has a picture, usually with words. Sometimes it's a GIF. It just means some kind of poster stuck on the internet, really.
Sorry, you were going to say something, Jules, before I nipped in.
Yeah, I was looking at it from the point of view of, if you are living on your own, as many of us do, speaking out loud, having the conversations that are in your head and vocalizing them, like Lucy was talking about, walking around the place, it feels as though it's exercising the muscle. Because I know from my own point of view, I can sometimes lose my voice. I can sometimes lose access to vocalizing things. And it feels to me that a lot of people who are more isolated, if they speak out loud as they are thinking in their head, I think it just keeps it running for them.
Is this talking about speaking out loud, or are we extending into that? Because speaking out loud, I mean, I know people who have conversations online a lot these days, and I mean, is that a real conversation, or is it a technologically assisted conversation? Sometimes I'll have conversations in my head where I'm like having almost interviews. Like I might even play out something that may be coming up for me. But I'll also explore ideas in depth through a call and response, a question and answer thing. I'll invent someone to bounce it off, because, and this is not a poor me thing, it's just there isn't really anybody to bounce these ideas off. I'm reluctant to use the phrase brainstorming because I was told not to use that by some people. Anyway, speaking out loud, I've noticed, happens when you're a pet owner as well, because you'll talk a lot to your pet. But I've long ago since stopped worrying about what the neighbours might be thinking about me when they hear me talking and they know I'm in here on my own. But that's cool. I've always spoken to myself.
Kathy on the Facebook saying, I can't stand my voice, but I do sing really badly, so it's probably good I live alone. Laughy face.
Well, I've heard Kathy's voice and I don't agree with her. I think she sounds fantastic. The meme, I think what you said there, Ray, really fits into what the autistic teacher was putting out there, saying that we are active. we're having conversations with other people that aren't there inside our heads without vocalizing them, because we don't have other people to have conversations with, vocalizing them. We have many more conversations, full conversations inside our head than we do outside in real life. I would say those conversations are entirely valid and important. They're more than thoughts. They're a way of framing whole sentences. They're a way of hanging on to language and creating things. And if we do that, when we do have the option of speaking with somebody that we have a connection to, we've got all of that still going on. And yes, I did extend it out to say that, you know, talking out loud to yourself is a good thing.
I remember real life when I was more sociable, right? And knowing lots of people and being in loads of social situations and still having no conversations with anyone. Not because I was unable. I tried. It's just there was no engagement. There was no feedback. Sometimes you're just in the wrong place. And I'm not saying that's any kind of excuse for you not, you know, accessing your full engagement with your life and society. But I've been largely disappointed by the social world, you know, and not that I'm totally reliant on my own thought processes for company, but I remember there's a philosopher I read, and he said some of his best friends are books. You know, he looked up at his bookshelf in this video and said, "These are my friends. I can dip into them anytime and ask them things and have conversations and get replies." And some people may think, oh, that's just wishful, fanciful thinking, but I don't think so. And one final thing, also writers. A writer I admire once said if he was left stranded on a desert island and had the capability or the means, he would continue to write stories for company. And of course, there's a magic to writing as well. It can help you work things out. It can make things happen. It's bizarre. It's brilliant.
Well, maybe linking back to the meme again of the autistic teacher, if we're talking and having conversations in our head, we're also creating company for ourselves.
Unless you say, as David Bowie was once said to have said, you know, on my own, I'm in bad company.
I'm going to finish this post with a comment from the text, and it says, "What is thought but a conversation?" A nice meme in its own right, that one. Chloe Hayden. We've shared from Chloe before, and this is quite a big post, so I'm going to read parts of it, but then maybe people should look at the Facebook page. Chloe is an advocate, and she has a position where she made history as Australia's first openly autistic actress, and she's a co-chair of For Disability. Chloe says, I've spent my life advocating for disabled voices to be heard and protected, and have decided it's time to be in the room where it happens. If you are a MEAA member, I'm asking for your vote for me to be the disability co-chair, so I can ensure change, protection, and the raising of disabled voices throughout our industry. If you have Australian friends in the industry, please tag them in the comments. And then there's a link for MEAA members to vote in the post that you will find on our website. Part of what she says is she has a deep passion for ensuring a safe and equal future for all performers. And I've demonstrated that in the industry, as the union delegate for Heartbreak High, where I have ensured safer work practices to be enforced, and that all main cast are 100% union, I have ample experience in speaking to government bodies. I'm currently undergoing union occupation and health safety training, and have always and will always put the safety and protection of workers before all else. I've dedicated my life and career to disability rights and advocating for our right to exist. But you can only go so far outside the room. It's time to be in the room. Vote 1, Chloe Hayden, for disability co-chair. I think that stands on its own, that post. Moving on to reframing autism. And we have to be aware as we're recording this, that it's Neurodiversity Celebration Week. People have lots of different views on that. The post says it's Neurodiversity Celebration Week, founded by 16-year-old multiply neurodivergent student Sienna Castleton in 2018. Following years of prejudice and bullying, Neurodiversity Celebration Week challenges the harmful stereotypes and misconceptions that are leveled against neurodivergent individuals and unites people of all neurotypes. We'd like to celebrate by challenging the unfair labels members of our neurodivergent community are given, and shine a light on the neurodivergent strengths that are often at the heart behind these misnomers. In the meme, it talks about labeling. How I'm labeled versus what I really am. I'm labeled as touchy and easily upset. What I really am is sensitive and hyper empathetic. I'm labeled as distracted and fidgety, but what I really am is anxious and unsure. I'm labeled as lazy and irritable, but what I really am is dysregulated. Fickle and unreliable? No. Juggling social burnout. Rigid and obsessive? No. Hyper-focused and passionate. Inauthentic? No. Masking for my survival. Tactless and rude? No. Honest and direct. Naive? Gullible? No, I'm trusting and I'm altruistic. Cold and uncaring? No, I'm being logical. I'm basing and looking for solutions. Arrogant and aggressive? No, I'm autonomous and I'm self-preserving. Overbearing or cocky? No, I'm just knowledgeable and I'm sincere. Slow and procrastinatory? Now I see it as meticulous and contentious. Slow and procrastinatory? I see it as meticulous. I see it as conscientious. Obtuse, imperceptive? That's me seeking clarity and then processing. Distractible and disorganized? But I'm observant and I'm mentally agile. Nosy and righteous? I have a moral stance. I'm just-minded. Disabled by my disorder? No, I'm disabled by my environment and society. Plain weird. Well, that's what neurodivergent is.
You have to say there's a lot of words out there in the world, isn't there? This is something I've been experimenting with recently, which is like turning difficulties into advantages, or what they used to say, make an obstacle into a stepping stone, another cliches. But when you began this, I thought, oh, good, everything's negative. It's like even the responses are negative. But then I think about the fourth or fifth one, they began to be more affirmative. No, I'm hyper-focused and passionate. I'm not inauthentic. I'm masking for survival. I'm honest. These are all good, positive, affirmative things. Because it's so easy to get like locked into the negatives through words. And they lock you into that mindset. So this is talking about this labeling. So I think at the core of that is this thing that you see in a lot of resistance movements or minority groups, which is like reclaiming the power of the word used against you. I wouldn't even correct weird. I'd go, yeah, I'm weird. Let's discuss it. What's your problem? Not in an arrogant kind of combative way, just like, I'm curious, what's the problem with being weird? Because there's something to learn there, I think.
Ray, can I just say you're helping me so much with this weird acceptance, weird kind of self-acceptance stuff, because it's a word that I felt hurt by, but like I think it's like your enthusiasm for it. I'm just like, yeah, like I'm clinically weird, okay?
Don't say clinically. I mean, I know what you mean, but that's like, well, maybe. Yeah.
How about positively weird?
Just weird. Take it.
I heard somebody describe their dyspraxia as being clinically clumsy, and it made me laugh. And so it's like the clinically weird. I think, yeah, it's a joke. Like it's not, it's like a concept for I don't know, like this. I think, like you said, the strengths-based stuff's really important, and I think I've been learning lately, probably more the last year, to that if I'm not great at some stuff, then lean into the stuff I'm good at, even if it's really strange stuff, because it takes me somewhere. Okay, it's a different structure than somebody else might use, but it's my structure.
I would actually take a lot of the ones in a column A and not feel terribly offended by it. But that's just me, I've kind of got this sort of defense thing now where it's fine if somebody wants to call me some of these things. It doesn't really trigger me, to be honest. I mean, if somebody says for instance, once upon a time, somebody came up to me and said that I was intimidating, which I found a really strange thing, because I don't think I'm intimidating, or maybe I do come across like that or something. But I was like, okay, I'll take that. It's fine. I mean, I would say sometimes I'm tactless and rude, and I don't tend to correct myself too much. So maybe I'm thinking on the wrong lines, just accepting those words in column A.
Yeah, I think the proviso is like on whose terms.
Yeah, weird's fine. I don't mind weird. I don't mind any of them. It's that's their opinion. that's fine. I mean, I've got a good kind of just moving on from the conversation sort of thing where I'm happy that I'm weird. I actually make myself weirder in a lot of senses. I do the sort of pierced nose and the blue hair and the and the wearing clothes that sort of set me apart. I do those things. I mean, that could be seen as a bit of masking, I guess. But I'm happy to do those things and be the weird person at the party. Why not? I don't go to parties, but why not? I can do that and I can carry that. And actually, maybe that I feel that I'm defining myself that way because I'm happy with it.
I'm getting this weird thought, right, about 70s, 80s even, comedy sitcoms where, a minority group was often persecuted and labelled for fun. And then I began to see Trigger in my mind, from Only Fools and Horses. And I don't know where to go with that, Trigger. He was kind of not mocked, but tolerated. It was weird, that relationship and that character and how he fit in, if you see what I mean.
I always felt that he was sort of just part of the gang, and everybody brings something to the party, and why not? Why shouldn't he be included? And, his character is one where he's a bit naive and a bit silly, and they're not really laughing at him a lot of the time. He's just sort of there and commenting. He's just part of it. So, I'm guessing we're seeing a bit of acceptance there.
Yeah, you plot.
Let's own weird. When people call us weird, let's say thank you. Yes. Let's say individual. Let's say cool. Proudly different.
Hello, Nicola. I can... Oh, is sound gone?
I can hear you talking.
Right. So just maybe it's Jules has lost sound then.
I think so.
The posts are quite lengthy today. So I don't know if we want to take on any of them. We'll wait and see what Jules is up to.
Sorry about that, guys. Can you hear me?
Hi, Jules. Can hear you now.
So we were talking about owning the word weird. In my household, we sometimes joke and call each other spazzes, which is one of the really nasty terms that as school kids that would be pushed against the odd person. I think sometimes if you're an adult, owning these terms and playing with them reduces their hurt and their painfulness.
Would you use that one publicly, though? I feel a wee bit edgy about that one. Don't know why, it just might be my conditioning and my experiences in life. But yeah, I don't know if I would use that one publicly. I don't know about yourself.
I think I'd only use it about myself and other people that I really that can trust me to know that I mean it from a good place. If we look at the post, what Lucy was saying about the left-hand side, the so-called negatives, owning them yourself and saying, actually, some of those on the left-hand side are things that we can weaponize. If I go to weird, I would weaponize that and I would say, yes, I am weird. I'm different to you. That's good. I've got individuality. And when it says on the tactless and rude, well, I know that I purposefully use rudeness to undermine people. And I often find myself knowing what the rules are and purposefully transgressing them with rudeness. It's not always
Are you still there? Is that what they call overcompensation?
I think we've lost you again.
Point taken, though. I mean, being combative and weaponizing is an option. It's not the one I take, but yeah, I feel there's a more defensive. There's things you get from Eastern philosophy that are more defensive strategies, which is like using somebody's force and power against them. Not even against them, it's just, applying it, changing its distribution, if you know what I mean. There's another line of thought that says, once you start fighting, they've got you. You're in their frame. You're in their game. And you're playing by their rules.
I think there's a lot of truth in that. Because when you learn martial arts, they don't just the main thing the first thing they teach you is to try not to get into fights or to try and get leave. It's not to kind of engage.
Well, you engage, but I think you're in it's how you feel about the engaging, how you being there. The first things I was taught, and I didn't do martial arts, I did Tai Chi and stuff and Qigong, but it was a pushing and shoving movement with some partner, which in itself is a major thing. If it's problematic for you to be physical with other people, or even just strangers, or bugs. But anyway, when you get into that thing of resistance and allowance, it's like you get into this flow of movement between two forces, and you learn to receive and then to apply without resisting. It's very, very difficult initially, but it's part of what that thing is, and it's a very somatic and bodily experience.
Sorry about that, guys. I had my internet connection broken. Am I back on?
Yes, damn internet companies.
Let's move to the next post and see what Harry manages to do in the edit. Sorry, Harry. Reframing autism.
He'll be loving this.
Yeah.
Well, then that's the way the mice will play.
I've screwed up his program for him. Sorry, mate. Neurowild. Help me understand co-regulation. Most adults wouldn't expect this child to regulate independently. Co-regulation is the obvious choice. Co-regulation with this child might involve physical touch, movement, e.g., rocking, dancing, deep pressure, e.g., squeezy, cuddles, temperature change, e.g., cold cloth, enjoyment, e.g., silly play, box songs. I have to say, I'm looking at this and I'm totally lost. I'm going to read out what it says and see what Harry makes of it. It's from Neurowild. I hope this one helps everyone understand co-regulation a bit better. When I say co-regulation, I mean that we're doing it with our kid, that we're not being sent away, that they're not being sent away to sort out their feelings on their own. You'll notice that many of the co-regulation ideas for the younger child are similar for the older child. Don't forget about them. Don't underestimate the power of connection, physical touch, and safety when you have consent from your kid. Any conversation that's driven by logic, perspective, or high-level language is one for another day. Don't go there when you're trying to help your child regulate. They don't have the capacity for it in that moment. Don't remind them of rules or expectations. Don't talk to them about consequences. Don't introduce any new hard things. Concentrate on helping them to come back down and have those conversations much later. Is anybody familiar with this? Because to me, I'm a bit lost.
Well, I'm the only one here is Lucy gone? Yeah. I'm not a parent. You both are parents, so I think you may have a better understanding of this than I do. And often when I feel a wee bit, excluded as a non-parent, I reflect on the fact that I am a child. And so I may now be an adult who once was a child who experiences this regulation topic.
I recognise what they're saying about the not talking stuff, and I know that when I'm supporting my son if he's had a really hard time and like he's been in a meltdown and he needs that time to kind of come back out of it. There's not a lot of talking. Talking might come, like it might come that night, it might come the next day, it might come a few days after, but it's not the goal. It's like almost just like that re-establishing safety, and that can be just through getting back into like things like, yeah, it can, in our house it tends to be like running water and nice crunchy food like cucumbers and just quiet company and what they call parallel play, when you're just in each other's space just doing your own thing.
Kathy said in comments, Neurowild is an Australian. She's amazing and writes and makes a lot of resources for schools.
I think what I'm trying to read from the post is that different children require different versions of co-regulation. And regulation, that's something where you're trying to take hold of your own feelings, how you expose yourself to the world. It's, if you're dysregulated, things are overwhelming and they're too much. And co-regulation are different techniques of helping a child by almost asking them to mirror you, or being in their own space with them, not challenging them with other extra things. I think, as Kathy says, the expert here is Neurowild. So if I haven't found anything helpful here, I think people looking at what Neurowild says directly might be more useful. And I'm going to move on to the next post, which is Effie, the Purple Bean autistic artist, and they're sharing something really lovely because they have a painting in progress that's rather beautiful. They always put up interesting artworks, and for us here, having those pieces of art as a representation that's positive about autistic people to share is a lovely thing.
I could almost tell right away that this was that same person because they've got these fly agaric mushrooms there. It's like their spirit plant, you know, the identifying feature. Wait a minute, look at that owl.
Yeah, I
it's
was
a great
admiring
owl.
a very moth-like owl.
Effie in the text describes it. Silver claw and forget-me-not forest, a commission for the amazing. Tonight I added metallic blue fine Posca paint pen to all the tips of the forest me-nots. I also added lots of tiny silver stars. Next is a cute little hedgehog, then a few more vines and a few more will-o'-the-wisp blue dots. Then one of my favourite commissions ever will be finished. I have really loved this. Watch this space for more owl art. Happy International Brain Injury Awareness Month. All are love and like beautiful humans and owls. Well, thank you, Effie Purple Bean, autistic artist. You sharing your art with us is a really positive thing. Thank you.
That gives a whole new meaning to the word touching.
I thought they were a forget-me-not type flower. She described them as forest-me-nots. Is that what they were?
I noticed that too, and I love that kind of thing. To me, that is one of the affirmative aspects of neurodivergence, which is when you say something wrong or a wee tone goes off in your phone when you're speaking, and it sounds even better than what maybe it's possibly intentional, but I'd like to think it's one of these happy accidents. Sorry.
It's like when you said about autocorrect, mistaking the things that we start to write and then seeing that autocorrect has a kind of poetic quality to it and then embracing it and using it. I heard on the radio about people having different phrases where they've said the phrase incorrectly by accident, and then they find that phrase or saying is something that they love to use anyway. It's progression and artistic, and let's embrace it.
Yeah, it's like inventing new languages. And back to the earlier conversation, it was a big kind of current within those isolated communities in 4chan that eventually ended up becoming the meme-based phenomenon behind the Trump election.
I'm going to move down to Pandas Online, which is the name for the organization, pandasonline.org, and NeuroBears is what we're involving ourselves with. From a young age, autistic individuals often face pressure to conform to societal expectations, like making eye contact or showing gratitude in specific ways. At NeuroBears, we champion the creation of safe spaces where autistic young people can express themselves freely, fostering an environment where natural behaviors are not just accepted, but celebrated. And in the post is generally about autistic masking. Sometimes we are asked, or children are asked, to say hello or kiss your relative goodbye or say thank you and look happy when someone gives you a present. Look someone in the eye when you shake hands and make sure you have a firm grip. And often these are things that the parent might think are helpful tools, but they also spin over into, when somebody is so young, potentially creating a masking scenario. So what they say is that these behaviors are considered to be the correct way to behave, but can be uncomfortable for autistic individuals. And this pressure to conform to neurotypical norms is known as masking. And masking can lead to exhaustion and anxiety and loss of identity. How do people feel about this post?
I was just typing there that this is when I discovered that the world was fake, which led to many things. Just as you were talking about, like loss of, what was it, identity? Unmasking. When you're conditioned as a young person to adopt these normative behavior patterns, and they don't feel right. Luckily, for myself, I trusted my judgment. that a lot of it was just social nicety, you know, not falseness, but, you know, an act. And of course you can play with it. I didn't know what masking was then, you know, but I did in a sense, you know, and I knew that this was a bit of an act. And to keep people happy, you act out. You give them what they want to a certain extent without going too far, because you've got to look after yourself. So that was just the thoughts that were coming to mind about that.
I find the whole of this quite a tricky area, because being lost because you've always masked to such a degree that you no longer have a identity that you recognize as personal is a thing that we have to avoid. But there's also the getting by, you know, the masking toolbox, the different versions of masking that we as adults are always using in different situations. I worry sometimes that the pendulum swings in too much in a direction where we say that everybody should be their completely authentic selves all of the time. And if we go to that stage, that's going to impinge on everybody else. There is a degree to which bringing up a child is about teaching appropriate behaviors for certain situations. To stop that becoming personal, permanent masking, one has to have alternative spaces where the child is entirely themselves and open and free, and know that it's about context.
I know what you mean by the pendulum, but I think it's more fluid. What is required is a space where fluid becoming is afforded, you know, allowed. Yeah, sorry, my dog's fidgeting a lot and it's a concern, so I have to check this out.
Dogs can definitely be distracting. Mine's is like made a den in my sofa. It's been quite hard to concentrate. But yeah, I think what you said there about the child needing to have a place where they can be themselves is so critical, because without that, it's just not possible to keep going. It made me think of like hearing somebody, I think they must have been in their 50s, talking about how, you know, they'd been brought up by really, you know, loving parents who really accepted him as he was, and they also kind of raised him to go, you know, and sometimes the rest of the world isn't as kind, and they kind of coached him to kind of survive that world. So it's really different than somebody just never always been told like that they're wrong, that keep it in, no, like you're like no autism stuff's okay, all that stuff. Yeah, and you know, because I think I got to a point where I was so burnt out that there were certain things that I couldn't do anymore. I couldn't make myself do eye contact the normal way, and I couldn't make myself like greet strangers when I'm out walking and stuff like that. And I just decided just to like accommodate myself because of how like much I just couldn't keep doing that, and I didn't want to shut myself away. And I do, like, there's times where I'm like, gosh, it's like it's be great to be able to just mask that and like operate in the world, you know, in a way of my choosing. And it's hard. I have to just kind of cut my cloth according to what I can manage. Sorry, I went on a bit there.
I think we all here, I think, may have an experience of all this before diagnosis, before any knowledge of it, of autism, of neurodivergence, as some reason or explanation for how we were and what our lives were like. We possibly called it other things. And so this post is about the child, isn't it? It's about those formative years again, isn't it? A young age, when you're developing behaviours. And I suppose before we knew what we know now, we just had to fit in with all that, square peg and round hole aspect, and formed sort of judgments and opinions and thoughts about how that felt. So I don't know where to take that from there in relation to this post, but I just thought I'd put that in.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is valuable there. We all remember our childhood, and we all remember being encouraged to do the things that are being criticised here, to say thank you in the right way to Auntie when she gives you a present and such like. I remember from my childhood that I was kind of encouraged to do that, but it was framed in such a way as to say that this would make life go smoother. These examples are tools. These are things that you can do, and there was a duplicity to life. There are different situations where you behave in different ways. You wear different clothes for going swimming to being in a football team, and you have different behaviors that fit with being in the swimming queue to running around on the pitch. So behaviors, in a way, or the way you mask to do things to fit in with that particular situation, are like putting on clothes and taking off clothes. But the damage is when people never manage to change out of that, to be naked in themselves, to be themselves. And it does all start in childhood. But then I'm a high masking individual, as they now call it, somebody who we used to call it functional, and now we call it high masking. And I put on my masks and take them off. And the reason I'm a 59-year-old man who says that he's had a good life and a happy life has partly been about my skill in masking in certain situations and my judgment of when I can be my unmasked self. I don't spend a lot of time giving people the expected behaviors, but there are certain times when I do, and that has helped me. It's a real tricky one.
It's almost as if that performance, and I say that in a very positive way, is your authentic self. Because I'm going to have to ask the question, is there such a thing as an authentic self? Is it one of these abstract promises that are out there? Oh, if you just find your real self. I think it's very fluid and adaptable. Even when you're a stick in the mud, when you're like decades of, habit, it can still change instantly. So when I hear you talk about your performance, well, I'm calling it performance, you call it masking. But I think that's you just empowered in your becoming, which can be anybody or anything at any time, but has a core. I must admit that. But that core, again, is quite fluid, I find. I don't think you can rely on it too much.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. That word of performance, because it's knowing, because you're doing it purposefully, it doesn't lose yourself. But obviously other people are in situations where they are so enforced, right from children, that masking has stopped them being able to develop a sense of self. They're always looking to fit in. They're always trying to not stick out from the crowd. So it really depends on your upbringing. And I suppose what this is trying to say is that it's like giving the alternative so that the person doesn't live the whole of their lives entirely lost in a mask that they then don't recognize. So many of the people that have publicly come out as autistic in the media describe themselves as people who never were themselves. And they describe it as having started with the kind of things that pandas online are pointing out in simple terms right from children.
It's like a play, a stage play, where you're reading someone else's lines and then you break out into your own lines.
Almost like being the Trojan horse in the situation. You fit in to a certain extent until you can actually say, now I'm going to shock you with this. Now I'm going to do this. And that feels authentic. But then the first bit's authentic as well, because you're planning the next bit.
You very quickly realise that you being authentic could ruin the whole play. So you are not primary. You're not the centre of the universe, however much you may feel and think that. So engagement is with others and with other things, with an environment. And so sometimes you have to play the environment.
Do you think parents sometimes risk making their children the center of the universe, so that when they do go out into the wider society, that they're unable to deal with the fact that they aren't the center of the universe? You know, there's a need for some kind of conformity and socialization in all of us, whether we're neurodivergent or neurotypical. We have to follow some rules and break others. And masking comes into this whole idea of whether you're so enamored to everybody else's rule that you don't have a sense that you're outside and you can be something different or progress something on in an authentic way.
I'm trying to remember, did that begin as a question, Jules?
God knows. Harry will probably cut it out anyway. Let's move on. National Autistic Society Scotland. This is one of our big charities here in the UK. You probably have big charities in other places in the world that sound very like this. National Autistic Society Scotland says, we are extremely concerned by the decision of XYZ, local authority, government, to stop accepting referrals to CAMS for autism and ADHD. Well, essentially to stop accepting referrals for autism and ADHD assessment, unless a child or young person has a co-occurring significant mental health problem. The decision, they say, is part of a worrying recent trend and comes after a government body decided to withdraw their adult autism assessment pathways. While a diagnosis shouldn't be
and isn't always a gateway to support for individuals, it's absolutely the case that many services and support options are simply not available or are more challenging to access without the diagnosis. Diagnosis is also, in their opinion, life-affirming and validating experience for many autistic people, and assessment should be readily available. Here in Scotland, they're talking about, but wherever you are in the world, that could mean where you are too. They say that they're going to be writing to whoever's going to listen to them about their concerns, and that they're also engaging with the Scottish Government to understand why these decisions have been made and seek reassurance that every effort is being made to extend the availability of autism assessments in Scotland. You can hear from the way I'm reading this that I personally think there's a bit of a mess going on here, but I'm going to stop talking so other people can say what they think.
I admire your subtle self-editing there. Sorry, Nicola.
I think what stands out to me as a salient point there is that kids who are experiencing distress, which is like a coexisting mental illness. So if you've got somebody who's got severe anxiety or depression, that to me is somebody who, this diagnosis is perhaps going to be able to offer understanding around how best to address their distress. And that means that perhaps kids who are autistic but are well supported in such ways that they're not suffering mental ill health. I just don't know if that's that dire, and I think that it's been quite, this might be really controversial stuff I'm saying, but because I think people could then argue, well, why do you have to wait until somebody's mental health's affected? But some mental health difficulties can become apparent quite fast. So I would definitely say that there would be a call to kind of make sure that people were aware of what to look for in terms of signs of distress. But I think that the autism community has been quite inclusive of self-diagnosis for a long time as well. And we recognise one another. And I feel like when my mental health's doing well, it's like it tends to be when my autistic needs are being quite well met too. So they're connected, I think. I'll pass. In the chat there, somebody's asked if PTSD with a question mark. So I'm assuming would that be a coexisting mental health problem? I'm thinking, yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely. But hopefully, you're picking up on issues like anxiety when somebody's not, worrying a lot, not sleeping at night, over preparing for things, or whether that's low mood, whether somebody's starting to say that somebody's unhappy and not just not getting an enjoyment of things anymore too. So I think these are things that we might see well before, hopefully well before trauma in some situations.
Yeah, who's monitoring all that? I mean, do the schools have any means of monitoring that in their, population?
I mean, I had to take my son to the GP and share, he's distressed. This is what he's saying. This is what's happening. I knew that my 8-year-old shouldn't be as distressed and as low as he was. And so I think parents can kind of, we can't, we need to go to the GP it's awful. It's awful when things are at that point.
I think we're supposed to think this is a great thing that they're doing for us. I think we're supposed to think that this big autism charity is going to be doing something for us by writing to the government to try and change these decisions. And it just seems performative to me, because they know damn well that in our society at the moment, under the constraints we are, it's not going to change anything. It's a performance of being helpful. And if one board does not accept referrals for ADHD or autism assessment when the child is surviving and getting on reasonably well, then that opens that possibility to somebody who's doing rather badly to get the help that they need. If you have a limited resource, you want the people who are struggling most to get that limited resource, and pretending that they can do anything to change and create more resources is just tokenism. What they could be doing is saying, we are creating an alternative to those people who are being missed out. People do not need to be diagnosed. They need to be supported. They need to identify or be identified in a way that they can be. They don't need a diagnosis. They just need support as individuals. So they could do something entirely different to this. But the easiest thing is to just write on the internet that they are addressing something. It's valueless. It won't have any effect.
It's almost an admission of impotence, isn't it?
In the central section of this, they say, while a diagnosis shouldn't be a gateway to support, it is. But they are the charity that creates the support. So it's them that's making the decision that you need a diagnosis to get support. What they could do is create a version of support that's cheaper and that includes autistic people in that, to make it possible for a wider range of autistic people to get some valuable peer-led support. But no, what they want to do is try and maintain the status quo and keep themselves in their jobs.
Yeah, there's no mention of self-identification there, is there?
Just before we go, a very quick one. The neurodivergent experience. Great news. We have partnered with RTN Mental Health Solutions for private assessments, interest-free payment plans. And they point out the NHS may have up to a 5-year waiting list in different places for autism and ADHD. So here we are. The neurodivergence experience is saying, you're not going to get it in your normal way. So come and pay for it. Interest-free, like buying a car. Are we happy with that?
I just don't feel like qualified to say what we should be doing here. Do you know? It feels just like massive, and I feel like anybody who's in the situation when they're looking at forking out for like a diagnosis because it's going to help them get support, it's just that, you know, such a really like could be at such a painful point in their lives. Like you could be really struggling.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't either. But what we're pointing out here, though, is that it's coming down to money. If you can afford to get yourself privately assessed, you might have the ability to get into some kind of support, or you might get a better situation in schooling. It's not thinking about a more radical solution forward. And that's unfortunate. But, you know, maybe things will change. I'm sorry to leave us on a confusing note there, listeners. But it's not easy and we don't have all the answers. Thank you to all the people who have put out these posts that Harry has carefully collated and curated for us. Every week, we give people the opportunity to comment on these posts, and why don't you join us another week and put your view forward? Tell us we're wrong. Give us an alternative view. Thank you. Thank you for everyone, and good night from Autistic Radio.